Hi, I'm Mike Creevy, host of the Ever Ancient Ever New show on Holy Family Radio, AM 720, 720 WHYF, in the local Harrisburg area. It's a Catholic station that is broadcast just west of Harrisburg in Sharmanstown. And for the last couple of years, I have been very privileged to be the host of the Ever Ancient Ever New show, and basically, by God's grace, the creator of the show. So I wanted to share with you today a little bit about the brief little background of the program and how it came about, and then just sort of touch on some of the things that I basically do behind the scenes, to prepare for an episode, and how I basically conduct the interviews for the Ever Ancient Ever New show. So the program itself, we are in our fourth year already. I mean, the first episode, I believe, aired in the beginning of 2014, January of 2014, but we recorded that in November 2013. So I'm recording this right now in September of 2017, and basically what happened was in the summer into the fall of 2013, I was, just in some conversations with a couple other youth ministers, youth directors, religious educators. I was working at the time at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Mechanicsburg. It was my home parish that I grew up going to. And really just from my own background in youth ministry in a couple different settings, 2 parish settings, and then several others as well, working with mostly high schoolers and then college students, sometimes working with middle school. I also was working at the same time with middle schoolers in the religious ed sort of side of the house, basically, working with the confirmation program and coordinating that at the parish at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. And just kind of drawing from my own experience in the youth and young adult ministry world, just some of my observations and a lot of really good observations from other youth ministers and other religious educators I really respect, I started to really just kind of, get a feel for some of the questions and some of the struggles and when it comes to living faith, learning your faith and living it out, that people in, those particular formative years of high school really into the college age years and really all the way through your 20s and your early 30s even, that sort of youth and young adult time frame. Some of the issues that were particularly important for people, and myself at the time, I'm getting into my 30s now, moving further away from that age range, but it was very relevant for me, it was relevant for my friends, relevant for then the people I was working with, the young people I was serving. And, you learn as you go how to maybe try to answer some of those questions or what resources to suggest to someone who might be asking those questions. And oftentimes how to not answer some of those questions. You learn from your mistakes. So, kind of with that experience, I was increasingly interested in trying to, look into maybe suggesting ways that we could get a show on Holy Family Radio since we have this station in the Harrisburg area. With increasing amount of local programming at that point, I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if there was a program on Holy Family Radio that dealt with some of those topics and issues, where you maybe had a guest on, the guest could be interviewed by the host of the program, and, you bring different experts or different people maybe who are struggling with some of those things themselves into the studio to talk about that. Well, as God often does, you ask for something like that to happen, and he then makes you the person to do that. So I didn't really necessarily have a plan starting out. I had no experience in radio myself, other than really drawing tremendous, benefit from Catholic radio in my own personal faith journey. And podcasting was really starting to, be very widely accessible. And, it just really developed in a conversation then with Doug Nietrauer, a station manager at Holy Family Radio, where he basically, thought it was a good idea, and they had been thinking about the same thing actually. So that sort of need was met up with or the desire that was there was really kind of met by my willingness to do it and really take it on, and something I was very excited to try. So long story short, here we are 4 years later, and we have, at the time of this particular recording, we have 66 episodes, I believe, recorded. So the program typically airs every other week on Tuesdays at 12:30 p.m. That's for the actual, if you catch it on the radio band, you can stream it as well, and then we have the podcasts that we post, usually same day. So that's a little bit about the background of the show, and I'll talk a little bit more now just about what I do in my capacity as the host of the show. And basically, some people ask, where do all of the topic ideas and the guest ideas come from? Well, a lot of prayer, my own experience, just kind of trying to uh, see what we haven't addressed in a while too. Sometimes we'll rotate back to a particular topic, but covered from a slightly different angle, maybe, or get a different guest with a somewhat different take on it. And that's kind of how I go about that. But essentially, the way it normally works is I just try to whatever time I can, because obviously this isn't my job, per se. I have to really try to carve out time to really dedicate to the program, and I really love doing that. So whatever time I can do, sometimes I have a little more availability than others. So I try to get several shows done, kind of at within a couple weeks or a month or two time frame, and then there'll be kind of periods where it's maybe I'm not working on it as much. So there's a little bit of an ebb and flow with it. Rarely, only really when my wife and I had our first child, I took a little time off from that. We basically ran a couple of programs in sort of a rerun, schedule for a while there till I could get some new programs done. Typically, though, I'll record them a couple shows in advance. I get the finished, sort of, well, really the raw files of the interviews themselves, and anything I have to kind of add to it. I get that to Ian Mattis, the producer of the show. Ian's fantastic, and Ian has been working on the show from the very beginning. And Ian is the one who basically really pulls everything together, makes sure all the levels are right, and all the editing and everything, and then basically prepares the program for broadcast. So, as I mentioned, I basically, it's a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls, getting in touch with guests, potential guests, and thinking of people to bring on the show, thinking of topic ideas. That's not really all that difficult, quite frankly. What's hard is scheduling people. So actually getting people scheduled can sometimes be the most difficult thing because everybody's busy. In most cases, I'm dealing with guests who are youth ministers, religious educators, Catholic speakers, some of whom have sort of international renown sometimes, and I'll get an email back from one of them in like London, or oh yeah, I'm in Rome this week, I'll get back to you when I get home. So that can be really challenging, just trying to pin people down to be able to set up an interview. If I do a tabletop interview, I'll grab this here, I will typically use my Zoom H2N microphone. It has microphones in it on the top here, and this little wind guard. And then it's also got a recording capacity, and it has an SD card in it, which is fantastic. And this is just a great little recorder for really doing stuff on the go, doing interviews with people in person. Typically, I use a Blue Yeti USB microphone for interviews over the laptop. And what I'll do for those is I'll call basically my guests through Skype. And I have the feature on Skype where I can call people's phone numbers, basically, even if they don't have a Skype account. So I call their phone numbers. We just establish our connection, make sure everything sounds good, and then I'll just hit record. I have a little extension that I purchased for Skype that was super cheap, and that just comes up and enables me to record the phone call. So really simple. The technology today is just so extraordinary and so accessible that really a lot of times my job comes down to just scheduling, time management, setting up a time for like a 20-minute, typically 20-minute interview with someone over the phone most of the time. I'll record that. Then if I have to go back and do sort of an introductory piece, the opening and closing prayers, and any background information on the guest, their ministry, the topic, whatever it might be, I'll do that separately so I don't kind of eat up their time. And then what I'll do is I'll use typically just GarageBand, on for my purposes, just to make a real simple, finished file. Sometimes I usually do it in two halves, so the first half of the show and the second half, and then I'll send those files to Ian, like I mentioned earlier. And I typically just upload them on Google Drive. Ian pulls them out of there, and then he does his thing, and there's a whole other video he's created to kind of go into all of those details of the behind-the-scenes stuff that he does. So that's typically what I do for the Ever Ancient, Ever New show in the capacity, as the host of the program. I hope that the program is very beneficial for people, for young people who catch it and listen to it, that it might be something that helps them in their own faith journey wherever they're at. But it's a very wide potential audience here, because if you're not in that high school age range or college age range, you know someone who is. We all have relatives, friends, niece, nephew, son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter. I say those Catholic grandmas who are there listening to Catholic radio oftentimes have someone in their life, a grandson or a grandniece or granddaughter, whatever the case may be, who might be struggling with something that is very common in this day and age. Whether that's struggling with belief in God at all, struggling with the question of suffering, struggling with how to pray, having difficulty fitting in an environment on a college campus where their faith isn't something that's really valued by those around them or respected, or if they're even facing persecution in some cases for living out Catholic faith. So all of these things are real issues that we're seeing today, that we're dealing with, and in every age, the church faces those same challenges. So that's a little bit about what the goals of the Ever Ancient, Ever New show really are. It's a conversation of faith, specifically geared towards some of those issues and topics that touch in the lives of young people, and especially that high school age, 20-somethings, 30-somethings, and those kinds of phases of life. So hopefully this video has helped you get a little bit better idea of the background of the Ever Ancient, Ever New show, a little bit about what it's about, and I want to thank you so much. So again, I'm Mike Creevy, host of Ever Ancient, Ever New. Check it out on Facebook, or also on Twitter over there at EAEN show on Twitter. On Facebook, just look up the Ever Ancient, Ever New show. It'll come right up, and you'll see our page. That's typically where I post on the wall there all of the links to the podcasts of previous episodes, so you can go there and check it out. And yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to share with you today. If you have any questions, feel free to go to the social media and ask away. Get in touch with us for the program, and especially if you have any suggestions for future show ideas, topics and guests, whatever the case may be. I'd love to hear about those and see if we can get those into the queue. So make straight your ways and hope in Him. God bless.